Welcome to This Week, Those Books, your rundown on books that resonate with the week's big news story. The big story this week is that the fall of Syria's dictator has set off ecstatic scenes, which recall similar events in neighboring Iraq and in Libya. But with groups competing to fill the vacuum, there are fears Syria could descend into chaos. But Bashar al-Assad's regime was not toppled by foreign forces, as happened with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, or by fighters supported by NATO, as with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And for the moment, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS rebel group, which has seized control in Damascus, seems to be taking a pragmatic and inclusive approach. This week's books include a scholarly look at who's taking charge in Syria, what went wrong with Libya, and a novel from Syria's neighbor, Iraq, about a strongman's bloody handiwork. The backstory is that the scramble for Syria is underway with foreign powers trying to influence events as a new government's formed. Israel is conducting airstrikes on Syria and invaded Syrian territory. In northern Syria, there's been fierce fighting between rebels supported by Turkey and Kurdish forces backed by the U.S. And Russia is holding on to its naval base and its air base in Syria, crucial to maintain clout in the region and in Africa. This week's first book is The Age of Political Jihadism, a study of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham by Aaron Zellin. Zellin, whose research has long focused on Sunni Arab jihadi groups in North Africa and Syria, recently noted that HTS's leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani's recent statement sounded like a Western HR department rather than a jihadist warlord. He was referring to Jolani's comment, "Diversity is a strength," on the ethnic and religious mix of Aleppo, as HTS captured Syria's second largest city. Zellin's expertise makes this 2023 study crucial to understanding Jolani, who may become Syria's de facto leader and be responsible for preventing his country from becoming another Iraq or Libya. Zellin notes Jolani's evolution and that of HTS. He writes that this is the strongest and most successful jihadist case seen thus far for a more pragmatic approach to day-to-day politics, auguring what could be a trend in political jihadism. And a quote, Jolani has stated that he primarily wants two things from the United States and the West. There is no need for you to classify people as terrorists and announce rewards for killing them. What we might have in common would be putting an end to the humanitarian crisis and suffering that is going on in the region and putting an end to the masses of refugees that flee to Turkey or to Europe. The second book is Understanding Libya Since Gaddafi by Ulf Lessing. After Gaddafi was overthrown in 2011, Lessing was one of the few foreign journalists to report from there. His knowledge helps us understand what went wrong with Libya's euphoric revolution. He tries to explain why this North African country, with its embarrassment of riches and wealth of natural resources, has descended from a popular uprising against a dictator into a failed state and major security headache for its neighbors in Europe, the Middle East, and West Africa. This is exactly what many fear for Syria, so Lessing's exploration of Libya is instructive. He tells a story of a weak central government which tried to co-opt the militias by paying them. When those payments stopped, the militias turned to other income sources, such as kidnapping and people trafficking. The national struggle became a battle over resources rather than state-building democracy and governance. That Libya's conflict is not about ideology, but money, and that it's hard to end because too many people benefit from the status quo. Choice quotes, while the rebels united over ousting Gaddafi, their loose alliance fell apart as the various groups pursued different agendas and distrusted each other for political, regional, or religious reasons. The brutality of the Gaddafi era was also a driver in the post-revolution era, as many Islamicists took on former regime security, former prisoners fighting their longtime captors. And the final book is The President's Garden by Mohsen al-Ramli, translated by Luc Lefgre. This novel from Iraq is only partly fictional because the author's brother was executed by Saddam in 1990. The story is about an unnamed president who is both capricious and cruel. Executions are commonplace. One of those who falls foul of the regime is Ibrahim the Fated. His childhood friends, Tariq the Befuddled and Abdullah Kafka, unite in grief over Ibrahim's murder. The novel starts with Ishmael puzzling over 9 banana crates on the roadside. But bananas were a rarity in Iraq because of a UN embargo. The first line of the book sets the tone. In a land without bananas, the village awoke to 9 banana crates, each containing the severed head of one of its sons. And a quote, each head had a story. Every one of these 9 heads had a family and dreams, and the horror of being slaughtered, just like hundreds of thousands slain in a country stained with blood since its founding and until God inherits the earth and everyone on it. And if every victim had a book, Iraq in its entirety would become a huge library, impossible ever to catalog. I hope you find this week those books thoughtful and a conversation starter. In the season of giving, please consider supporting this effort so that we can keep it freely accessible. If you can't afford it, just email This Week Those Books at substack.com and we'll give you full access, no questions asked. See you next week for This Week Those Books.